William Lane Craig recently put up another one of his rather stylish animations, this time on mathematics and God. In it, he essentially presents the argument that the applicability of mathematics is best explained by God's existence. Stephen Woodford from Rationality Rules then put up a response video in which he attempted to debunk Craig's argument. I thought I'd respond to Stephen, especially since he asked for people to do so in case he's missing something, which I think he is. So this is my response to Rationality Rules' response to Craig's argument for God from math. Hi, this is Lucas from Deflate, countering the skeptics' objections to Christianity. And this lovely animation here is to make you feel happy clicking that subscribe button. Thanks! In the video description, you'll find the links to Craig's video and Stephen's response to it, in case you want to familiarize yourself with them first. Right at the start, I'd like to emphasize here that I appreciate and admire Stephen's honesty and humility. At the end of his videos, he says,
"Because of this, I can't help but knock the feeling that I'm missing something. So if any of you think that I am, then please do let me know and I'll make another video."
Stephen sets a great example for us all, including myself, that our personal grasp of things, as much as it may look reasonable to us, may not actually be the real deal. So let me second Stephen's admission right from the start. While I have thought through my presentation to the best of my ability, it is quite possible that I'm missing something too. And so I want to say that I'm both open to and thankful for feedback. Also, let me mention at this point that my previous interaction with Stephen over the kalam and free will was a pretty cool experience. I want to say a big thank you first to Stephen and to all of his followers who've come over and expressed their appreciation of what they consider to be a respectful discussion between two people who disagree. These comments were quite an inspiration and made me feel hopeful for us YouTube debate freaks. Also, thanks to Stephen and his crowd for checking on me after that crazy blast rocked Beirut. We're doing well over here, but things are pretty messed up, obviously. Anyway, all of this is to say that I think there's some exciting and beautiful times ahead of us if we can keep these friendly vibes going, even as we disagree with each other. So thanks, Stephen, and thanks to all of you guys. Now, 3 practical disclaimers before we start. First, Craig had a conversation about Stephen's video on capturing Christianity, so be sure to check out what Craig himself has to say. You'll find the link to that in the description too. I had finished my script already when Craig went live with Cameron and hadn't actually watched that conversation before filming this video, so I hope I'm offering something new here. Second, I can't pick up on every single one of Stephen's points, so I'll simply focus on what I see to be the essential aspects of his video. For example, I will not comment on the use of the word miracle in Eugene Wigner's seminal paper, The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences, nor on the issue of whether Wigner was an atheist or a theist. It's not that I find these issues uninteresting or unimportant, or that I want to evade them. It's just that I don't think they are as crucial as the things I've chosen to focus on. Having said that, my judgment might be wrong, and if it is, I hope I'm not causing too much frustration by leaving out what others think should be talked about. With all of that out of the way, let's get right into it. Craig claims that naturalism cannot explain the applicability of mathematics in the sciences other than by saying it's coincidence. Craig then contrasts that with the explanation given by theism, which is that God has chosen to create the world according to the plan he had in mind. Mathematics and physics work so well together because the same mind that designed the universe on a mathematical model also built the universe on the same mathematical model. Now let's turn to Stephen's response. To state the obvious, being an atheist, Stephen does not accept Craig's claim that God has chosen to create the world according to the mathematical plan he had in mind. Instead, as both an atheist and naturalist, Stephen argues that mathematics has its origin in the human rather than in the divine mind. In other words, according to Stephen, mathematics is invented by us. Thus, Stephen's claim:
mathematics works because that is precisely what we've designed it to do.
Mathematics is designed, according to Stephen. It's an invention of the human mind, conceived and constructed for the purpose of describing nature. After analyzing Stephen's video, I believe that he essentially offers 2 pieces of evidence in support for his case of mathematics being a human construct. First, the alterability of axioms, and second, the consistency of the universe. Thus, he says that
the reason that mathematics is so unreasonably effective is the same reason that reason is so unreasonably effective. It's because 1, when it's not effective, we alter its axioms so that it is, and 2, the universe is fairly consistent, and so it's no surprise that the tools that we created for our own environment happen to be applicable to other environments.
Now let's look at the 2 points in turn. First, Stevens claimed that the effectiveness of mathematics is due to the fact that when it is not effective, we alter its axioms so that it is. Now, I don't know whether you're aware of the gravity of Stevens' claim here, and without any intention of being disrespectful, really, I'm not even sure he himself is aware of what he is claiming here. I mean, what are mathematical axioms? They are the fundamental building blocks of mathematics, which are held to be universally true without needing proof. Or as the concise Oxford Dictionary of Mathematics puts it, an axiom is a statement whose truth is either to be taken as self-evident or to be assumed. For example, the 5 axioms of algebra are the reflexive axiom, which states that A equals A. The symmetric axiom, which states that if A equals B, then B equals A. The transitive axiom, which states that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. The additive axiom, which states that if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. And the multiplicative axiom, which states that if A equals B, then A times C equals B times C. These are just the basic axioms of algebra. But each branch of mathematics has its own set of axioms. To pick just one more example, the first axiom of Euclidean geometry is that a straight line may be drawn between any 2 points. Now, all of this sounds rather self-evident and universally true, right? Yeah, that's exactly why these statements are called axioms. Axioms are the ultimate bedrock upon which mathematical deduction and reasoning are built. Thus, all mathematical theories draw their very life from them. Now, with this in mind, just ponder the gravity of Stevens' answer to the question of why mathematics is so unreasonably effective.
It's because 1, when it's not effective, we alter its axioms so that it is.
What was that again?
It's because 1, when it's not effective, we alter its axioms so that it is.
Stevens wants to make us believe that whenever a mathematician or scientist encounters some phenomenon in the physical world which the accepted system of mathematics cannot describe, we just happily change the axioms so that it can. Really? It seems to me that Stevens is unaware of the rather far-reaching implications that come with this claim. I mean, let's say scientists discover some super special phenomenon at the beach in Portsmouth, which has never been observed before. As they study it and try to figure out the mathematical equation to capture it, they realize that they can only do so if the second axiom of algebra, stating that if A equals B, then B equals A, is altered into saying if A equals B, then B does not equal A. Now, if the scientific community were to deny the truth of the second axiom of algebra and alter it just for the sake of getting mathematics to correlate with the reality of that one single phenomenon they are facing on one particular beach, what would that imply? It would imply that the truth of the mathematical descriptions of every other physical phenomenon which has been described so far would be relegated to the trash bin of falsehoods. So if Stevens thinks that the axioms of, let's say, algebra can be altered to make mathematics fit with reality, I like to respond by saying that this may be a nice idea to build upon for science fiction movies, but it has nothing to do with the facts of the real world described by people who are actually ruled by rationality. Having said this, I want to admit that I might be misunderstanding Stevens here in this sense. It might be that when Stevens talks about altering axioms, he's not talking about people changing specific axioms like, let's say, the second axiom of algebra featured in my example with the beach. Instead, he might intend his talk about altering axioms to refer to a modification of the totality of axioms whenever a single new axiom is introduced. Although that's not what I understood Stephen's talk about axioms to mean, I'm perfectly open to the possibility that Stephen did mean it this way. So, as a matter of honesty and charity, I'd like to point out here that if I misunderstood Stephen, my criticism does not apply. However, it's not the case that the problems go away if we take Stephen's claim about altering axioms to refer to a modification of the totality of axioms. I can think of two issues in particular. First, it's an oversimplification and one might say something of a degradation of mathematics to claim that whenever it doesn't correlate with reality, we simply alter its axioms. This sounds as if mathematics is science's slave, charged, among other things, with the task to modify axioms whenever scientists face troubles in coming up with scientific theories. And what he's telling is that Stephen doesn't actually provide an example from the history of science and mathematics when the community of mathematicians responded to a need from the community of scientists by handing to them a new set of axioms. Now, he does mention that explaining the trajectory of celestial bodies required us to alter our mathematical axioms, but he doesn't actually give us evidence for how this supposedly happened. And so this alleged example of how axioms were supposedly changed to make math correlate with the reality science describes doesn't clarify things, but actually obscures them even more. That's probably why a math professor and friend of mine who pondered Stephen's claim about mathematical axioms being altered to make math correlate with reality was far from impressed and responded by saying, "Mathematics has never cared for reality. It is reality that tries to catch up with math." Now, contrary to Stephen, she actually went on to give an example to back up her claim and pointed out that complex numbers were in theory years before scientists started applying them. In other words, the development of complex numbers occurred fully independently from the scientific quest to describe reality. Or to give another example, Newton used Euclidean geometry and its axioms for his theory of gravity, while Einstein used Riemannian geometry and its axioms for his theory of special relativity, which of course updated Newton's theory. Thus, one may be tempted to say that Riemannian geometry, which was developed long after Euclidean geometry, arose in order to make mathematics correlate with reality better. However, it's simply a misreading of the history of science to think that Riemann developed his geometry in order for Einstein to be able to formulate his theory of special relativity. There simply doesn't exist any link there. In other words, while new axioms in mathematics may somehow correlate to the pursuit of new scientific theories, though only faintly so, it is definitely not the case that the formulation of new axioms is caused by the pursuit of science. And again, even though Stephen claims the opposite, he does not actually offer a viable example from the history of science. Now, the other issue is this. This might just be me not hearing Stephen well, but besides the point I just mentioned, it seems to me that he's far too casual in saying that when mathematics doesn't work, which is to say that when it doesn't correlate with reality, we alter its axioms so that it does. Altering axioms in mathematics, that is, accepting new ones or modifying old ones, is not something that is taken lightly, because there is simply too much at stake for both math itself and the sciences. To pick three famous examples, Euclid's fifth postulate, the axiom of choice, and the continuum hypothesis in set theory have probably been the most controversial axioms in the history of mathematics. And the community of mathematicians has spent decades brooding over them. Mathematicians would tell you that the resistance to Cantor's set theory was huge before it was accepted. As I said, I grant that I may not be understanding Stephen properly, but two math professors share my sentiment after they listened to Stephen. One of them expressed that Stephen isn't careful and accurate enough, saying, yes, axioms can be altered, but this does not happen every day. And the other said, I haven't heard of axioms being altered, much less altered to fit reality or anything else, in my 20 years of exploring and studying math. If this quote is by a mathematician, we have to look into the context and see how they define alter and reality. But I doubt any mathematician would accept it. So let's wrap this up. We looked at Stephen's case for the altering of axioms as evidence of the claim that mathematics is a human invention. Here is my response summarized. First, if Stephen thinks, as I initially understood him, that one could change single axioms, he would render the realm of science and mathematics into a logical junkyard. But again, I grant that my criticism may be misplaced. But even if Stephen intends to talk about the modification of axioms in general, his claim is very problematic. And that's because mathematics doesn't alter axioms casually. And even more important than that, even when it does, this happens independently of the scientific pursuit of describing reality. Now let's move on to Stephen's second key argument in support of the view that mathematics is a human invention. This one centers around the consistency of the universe. Here it is.
The universe is fairly consistent, and so it's no surprise that the tools that we created for our own environment happen to be applicable to other environments.
Let's unpack this. First, I might be wrong, but if I understand him correctly, what Stephen means here is the following. Earlier in his video, he rightly admits that mathematical entities are abstract. However, he then directly points out that the things they were invented to refer to are not abstract, but concrete. Offering a practical example, he talks about the ancient Mesopotamians who were the first to make use of mathematics for the purpose of trade, astronomy, architecture, and other stuff. And so, when Stephen says that mathematics is so unreasonably effective because the universe is fairly consistent, and so it's no surprise that the tools that we created for our own environment happen to be applicable to other environments, he means the following. That is, if I get him correctly. Because the laws of physics that apply in your backyard where you want to build your tool shed also fairly consistently apply everywhere else in the universe, it is no wonder that the mathematics you need for figuring out how to build a sturdy tool shed will also be valid for describing the charge of electrons, the formation of clouds, or the orbit of planets around the sun. Again, like his argument from axioms, this is a key point, which is why he repeats it here.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, it's because the laws of the universe are robustly consistent, and thus the mathematics we develop to account for our own macroscopic physics is applicable to physical realms far beyond what we inhabit.
Now, this answer is too weak for a reason which Craig mentions in his initial video. It doesn't account for the fact that a great deal of mathematics cannot be physically realized. You see, to say that the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics is due to the consistency of the physical world would make sense if all mathematics could be realized in physics, chemistry, mechanics, civil engineering, or bioengineering, etc. But the truth is that this is not the case with what is sometimes called pure or theoretical math, whose concepts simply don't fit with the structure of the physical world. And yet, what makes things even more perplexing is that the realm of math, which cannot be physically realized in a direct sense, is still useful in the development of technology. For example, imaginary numbers are widely used in electroengineering to model how electric circuits behave or how electromagnetic waves travel, which is what allows us to talk on the phone, for example. So, for Stephen to say that the effectiveness of mathematics is due to the consistency of our physical universe doesn't account for what mathematics is in its entirety and complexity, combining both a realm of concepts that directly translates into the physical world and the realm of concepts that doesn't, both of which nevertheless can have application to the physical world. Again, this point is essentially made in Craig's video already. He says that, at most, naturalists can say that it's not surprising that math applies to the world, because the world itself just happens to have a mathematical structure. So of course, mathematics applies to it. but this is unsatisfactory. The reason why this is unsatisfactory is exactly because of what I just went through. Therefore, Craig says, a great deal of mathematics cannot be physically realized. So let's recap. In response to Craig, Stephen tried to give a naturalistic explanation of why math is so effective, saying that
mathematics works because that is precisely what we've designed it to do.
In other words, it's not because God designed and built the universe on a mathematical model, but it's because we designed mathematics to describe the universe that mathematics works. And the two arguments he puts forward in supporting his claim were first, that axioms are altered to make math fit with reality, and second, that the universe is consistent, and that therefore math as a tool for our immediate environment simply happens to apply everywhere else too. However, it should be clear by now that there simply is no evidence for the claim that axioms are actually altered to make math fit with reality. And Stephen's second answer doesn't do justice to mathematics as a whole, but corresponds only to that part of math which can be directly realized in physical reality. This means that Stephen's attempt to give a naturalistic explanation for the effectiveness of mathematics has failed. And so, this leads us straight back to Craig's initial claim, who said that naturalists cannot explain why mathematics works other than by saying it's coincidence. Stephen counters that and accuses Craig of committing the black and white fallacy by saying that it has to be either chance or God. According to Stephen, naturalism offers countless good explanations for the effectiveness of mathematics. Thus, he says,
naturalists have a plethora of ways to account for the effectiveness of mathematics, including the one I have given throughout.
Now, we've already established that the explanation given by Stephen doesn't actually work, but never mind. He now proceeds to allegedly provide 3 examples of the supposed plethora of naturalistic explanations for the effectiveness of mathematics, and includes video inserts that feature answers given by 3 scientists. First comes theoretical physicist Sabine Hössenfelder, who says,
No, I do not think that it is all that unreasonable that mathematics is effective in the natural sciences. Because what is mathematics about? It is a way to describe patterns, to describe regularities, and that's exactly what we do in the natural sciences.
Now, I must say that I do feel there to be a certain bond between me and Dr. Hössenfelder, because her German accent when speaking English comes pretty close to my own Swiss accent. Be that as it may, Stephen doesn't actually evaluate or engage with what Hössenfelder says, and that's unfortunate, as we will see in a minute. So she says, quote, I do not think that it is all that unreasonable that mathematics is effective in the natural sciences, because what is mathematics about? It is a way to describe patterns, to describe regularities, and that's exactly what we do in the natural sciences. Now, when you look at this more closely, it turns out that Hössenfelder is essentially saying the very same thing as Stephen when he told us that mathematics works because the universe is consistent. Hössenfelder simply puts it differently by saying that the universe, which the natural sciences describe, is regular, patterned, and that's why mathematics, which is also about patterns and regularities, works. That's nothing new, but the same thing we've already heard from Stephen. So even though he told us he'd provide us with 3 other examples of naturalistic explanations, his first example is basically his own one, just reiterated by another person and reformulated with different words. And we've already seen that this explanation doesn't actually work because it doesn't account for mathematics in its entirety and the complex ways in which it is applied. The second person Stephen cites is famous physicist Steven Weinberg.
I don't think mathematics can be ever regarded as an explanation in itself of anything. And this has not always been well understood. Perhaps it's even still controversial. Physical theories aren't the way they are because of principles of mathematics. Principles of mathematics are the language in which we state our physical principles, and they are the way the intellectual tools we use for calculating the consequences of those principles. But nothing is the way it is because of some mathematical principle.
Again, Stephen doesn't engage with Weinberg's statement, and so I'll do that here. Here is the quote verbatim. Is this an explanation for why mathematics is effective in describing the natural world? No, it isn't. What Weinberg does is this. First, he simply denies that mathematics can be regarded as an explanation in itself of anything, but he does not give evidence for it, which makes the statement just awkwardly hanging there, presumably for us to dismiss it with the zero evidence with which it was asserted in the first place, as the late Christopher Hitchens advises us to. Second, he says that physical theories aren't the way they are because of principles of mathematics. Principles of mathematics are the language in which we state our physical principles, and they are the way, the intellectual tools we use for calculating the consequences of those principles. But nothing is the way it is because of some mathematical principle. To condense this, Weinberg is saying that nothing, neither physical theories nor anything else, is the way it is because of some mathematical principle. Well, fair enough. The question is not whether there is an alleged causal relationship between numbers and physics, which neither Craig nor I would claim. The question demanding an answer is why is there such an effective and useful correlation between the abstract world of numbers and the physical world, even though not all of mathematics can be physically realized in a direct sense. But what Weinberg is telling us doesn't even come close to an answer to that question. Thus, by referencing Weinberg, Stephen does not provide us with an example of the supposed plethora of ways naturalists account for the effectiveness of mathematics. Now, the last scientist Stephen cites is George Lakouf, a cognitive linguist and philosopher. Since Lakouf is very clear and concise, I'll directly put up his quote. Mathematics is not in the world is as it is. Take a spiral nebula. The logarithm spiral is not in the nebula, it's in your understanding of the nebula. The marvelous thing about mathematics is that we can create mathematics with our brains that fit phenomena in the world remarkably. Basically, Lakouf is saying that mathematics is a marvelous invention of the human brain that fits the world. But here again, there is nothing new here. Instead, it's the very same thing Stephen told us already when he claimed that mathematics works because that's what we've designed it to do. It's also a variation of Stephen's claim that mathematics works because the universe is consistent, which is what we encountered already with Dr. Hessenfelder. And I guess I don't need to mention again why this explanation doesn't actually work. So Stephen's third example from the supposed plethora of naturalistic explanations for the effectiveness of mathematics is, like the first one, actually Stephen's own failed explanation, simply in different words. We are now in a position to tie all the threads together and conclude. Craig claimed that the naturalist cannot offer anything but chance to account for the effectiveness of mathematics, which doesn't really make for a satisfying explanation at all. On the other hand, the theist, by referring to God, does have a reasonable explanation at hand, to which Stephen replied by saying that Craig is committing a black and white fallacy in which black is God and white is coincidence or chance. Naturalists have a plethora of ways to account for the effectiveness of mathematics, including the one I have given throughout. Now, we've seen that Stephen's own account for the effectiveness of mathematics fails, and that's because, first, axioms simply aren't altered to make math correlate with reality, as Stephen wants to make us believe. And second, his claim from the consistency of the physical world does not do justice to the fact that a great deal of math is applicable even though it cannot be physically realized. Of the other explanations he provides, one is besides the point because it talks about whether math causes anything. And two of them are basically synonymous to Stephen's, which again does not make for a viable explanation in the first place. And so really, instead of a supposed plethora of plausible naturalistic explanations for the effectiveness of mathematics, we're left with None. Unless, of course, Stephen would want to jump on chance as an explanation. But then he's back to square one, or square zero actually, because saying that the effectiveness of mathematics is just a lucky coincidence simply doesn't make for a reasonable answer. What does this mean? Well, it means the following. Maybe Craig was wrong in presenting us with God and coincidence as the only two possible explanations for the effectiveness of mathematics. Maybe there is a plethora of naturalistic explanations rather than just chance, as Stephen tells us. However, Stephen has not been able to actually offer us a viable option. This means that until Stephen or another naturalist comes up with something that actually works, the divine mind carries the day as the most rational explanation for the effectiveness of mathematics. Thanks for hanging in there till the end. Again, always a pleasure to interact with you, Stephen, and your followers, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you, and bye.